edition of Why Wasn't It Better. I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I am your co-host, Anton Paras.
We have a veteran return guest. It's our producer, Eric Taylor. Welcome back, sir.
Welcome back, Eric.
How are we? I'm so happy to be back again.
Always excited to have Mr. Producer on.
Thanks, guys.
I'm always excited to have you back, Eric, but this is an extra exciting one because the last time that you were on, which was last season, we were talking about, of course, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, you sort of challenged us a bit. You're like, what's the worst movie you can have me on for next season? And I thought about it a bit, and I came up with Blade Trinity.
Well, the exact words you said to me were like, do you want me to find a movie you will hate, or just a bad movie all around? And my response was yes. I think you delivered. Your
memory is impeccable, and that is coming back to me now. Yeah,
brother, I listen to the episodes myself. I am an avid listener and also producer.
So let it be known then that whenever Pat gets a challenge, he always steps up.
I do. I thought my question made sense because a film you may hate is always not necessarily
sports films.
The worst one.
Don't care about sports film. If you had said a sports film, I would have been like, yeah, let's do it because I'm gonna hate it.
What about fictional sports?
What, like rollerball?
Yeah.
Or like.
Yeah,
what
I was going to rollerball. You read my mind.
I've never seen it, so like fictional sports.
It's
yeah,
awful.
that's different than, you know.
What about pseudo sports like Seabiscuit?
Or like I've seen Seabiscuit. Now it's just bored.
Or what about Slapshot?
Slapshot's
never seen that.
That's a fun.
I'll tell you what sports movies I will watch: Dodgeball, and Talladega Nights.
Great ones. Yeah. What about something like Bloodsport?
Expand. I don't know what Bloodsport is.
You've never seen
Van
Bloodsport? Think real life Mortal Kombat.
The Legend of Bolo Young.
I have not. I've seen a myriad of Jean-Claude Van Damme films. I don't know which ones. My roommate at the time, Pete and Ian, loved watching Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I was like...
And they never showed you Bloodsport?
They might have, dude. I
feel like you'd remember Bloodsport if you saw it.
Probably.
I mean, this is beyond Jean-Claude Van Damme. This is like Jean-Claude gosh darn.
I felt that.
You're welcome.
That was an absolute gut punch of cringe. I love it.
Also, what about, I mean, come on. Who doesn't get a little teary-eyed during Remember the Titans?
Never seen it.
Oh, that's a great one. Denzel Washington.
Denzel.
Yeah, that's a great one. Rocky, any of those? No.
None of those?
None of those.
Okay.
White Man Can't Jump?
Heard of it.
That's a pseudo sports movie, and I'm not.
It's a comedy, right?
I'm not denigrating White Men Can't Jump. I love White Men Can't Jump. Speaking of White Men Can't Jump, it stars Wesley Snipes.
Sorry,
Wesley Snipes is in that film.
Yes, he is.
And apparently, he's in this one too.
He's in some of it.
Did you see him in there? And
he's in some scenes.
Yeah, when he's when he wasn't in his trailer, he was in it.
Yes. Okay. I think we should move into Blade Trinity.
I'm so excited.
I am too. And look, I'm not going to spoil anything. This is one of my all-time least favorite films.
Wow.
I'm going to be having a bit of a go at this.
Good. Let's have some fun and be thankful that they kind of ended it here.
Yeah, no. The latest rewatch that I had to do for this episode was particularly unpleasant, but it had to pay off knowing that the discussion with you fine gentlemen would be a rewarding one.
That'll be a word for it.
The war between humans and vampires continues, but the humans' best hope, human-vampire hybrid warrior Blade, has been framed for countless murders, turning popular sentiment against him. The vampire leader responsible for Blade's bad publicity is Donica Talos, who's determined to finally lead her bloodthirsty compatriots to victory. Now Blade must team up with a band of rogue vampire hunters called the Night Stalkers to save humanity. Released on December 8th, 2004 by New Line Cinema, Marvel Enterprises, Eamon Roth Films, Imaginary Forces, and Sean Daniel Productions. Directed by David S. Goyer. Screenplay by David S. Goyer, based on Blade by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan, starring Wesley Snipes, Jessica Biel, Ryan Reynolds, Parker Posey, Natasha Lyonne, Dominique Purcell, Chris Christopherson, and Paul Levesque, aka Triple H. Budget of $65 million, so $106 million adjusted for inflation. Box office of $113 million, which is $184 million adjusted for inflation. Now, I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but Pat, why are we talking about Blade Trinity today?
Well, for starters, I'm a huge Wesley Snipes fan. He's one of my all-time favorite actors. I find pretty much all of his movies from the 1990s infinitely rewatchable. We mentioned White Men Can't Jump, Jungle Fever, New Jack City, Money Train. Rising Sun is one of my all-time favorite films. U.S. Marshals. I even like some of the more obscure stuff that he did, like Murder at 1600 and One Night Stand. I like just so much of what he did. I like that he could do legitimately. I think he was a good dramatic actor. I thought he was really good at comedy. And when it came to action, he was the real deal. He was a nth degree something black belt in some form of martial arts that I don't know. But whatever form that it was, it translated really well on screen because he was the real deal. I haven't mentioned the first two Blade films yet. I'm a huge fan of those. I watched them so many times in high school. I had them both on DVD. So when this film came out, Blade Trinity, and by the way, this year is the 20th anniversary of this film, Blade Trinity. And I don't want to imply that we're celebrating it because this film does not deserve to be celebrated. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's more like a memoriam. But the first Blade film, huge hit, comes out in 1998. It also has the distinction of being technically, I would say, the second Marvel movie, but it was the first Marvel movie, to my understanding, that the Marvel name was associated with. Anton, maybe you can speak
That's
to
correct.
that a bit later.
Yeah.
But it was a career year for Wesley Snipes. He was in, of course, U.S. Marshals with Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Downey Jr., right? That's a film we've covered way back on season 1. He really was one of the biggest movie stars of the 1990s. His career kind of peaked in 1998. It would never really be the same for him again. It was all downhill after that, with the exception of Blade 2 that came out in 2002, which, by the way, directed by a young up-and-comer named Guillermo del Toro. And pretty notable superhero films, right? And superhero films were, of course, new to Hollywood at the time. I was excited for this third Blade movie when it came out. I was disappointed by it in the moment. I'll turn it over to you, Anton, because I know you have some thoughts, but that's why I wanted to cover this.
I mean, I'm a big comic book fan, so it goes without saying that, yes, of course, familiar with Blade and a huge fan of Wesley Snipes as well. I feel like being a comic book fan, growing up and being able to see, like, of all Marvel superheroes or just even just properties chosen, Blade was one of the earliest, pick to actually have a film about him. It was a pretty unique choice. And at the end of the day, like a pretty fantastic choice, just because I really love that first Blade film. Wesley Snipes was the perfect person to cast as Blade. So I was, of course, very excited for every release. And that really set the stage for even more Hollywood acceptance and just really clamoring for more comic book films. So, of course, that same celebration is not this film. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's going to be really good to dig into this film, and it almost feels like it's also analyzing the downfall or just even kind of the fall of Wesley Snipes a bit, just because it really was kind of this point in his career. And I feel like as we go into the production more, we can see that it really was a bit of a turn for him, almost a heel turn, if you'll take that, a bit of a wrestling term there for any of our Triple H fans. But yeah, really excited to dig in today because this film is it is something else. It is like, how can we have an in memoriam for an undead film?
I think this film is dead. Eric, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So we all know why you're here. You asked for a challenge, but you don't see a lot of movies. But we like to have you on as a guest because we love your perspective, right? So you watched the first Blade film to prepare for this. You had never seen it.
Correct.
Knowing what you know about where superhero movies are now and what the industry was like in 1998, can you see why the hype for this third one was there?
Absolutely. Because when did the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans come out?
2002
2000s.
was the first one.
Was the first one.
The second one came out the same year as this in 2004.
But like for me, that Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was the first superhero movie that I had ever been exposed to. And I do think you're right in saying that it's a weird choice for a superhero movie.
If you
Because
think that's weird, do you want to take a guess what the first ever one was?
First ever Marvel.
Yeah, first Marvel.
First Marvel.
Not superhero. The first superhero movie I think is generally accepted as being Superman. Am I right, Anton?
Right. But now first Marvel like property film. It's pretty obscure, so if you don't get it, like just take a couple guesses.
I want to say like X-Men. I know that's not right.
Yeah, it's not X-Men,
I'll
but
give
it's
you
a
a
good
hint,
it's
Eric.
good guess. X-Men was really early.
George Lucas is involved in it, and it was a disaster.
I'm not. Well, no, you're gonna say it. I'm gonna be really mad.
No,
It's
you're not gonna. No.
It's a terrible, terrible film known as Howard the Duck.
Oh, I did know that. I did know that.
Yeah.
Well, obviously I didn't know it, but it's sort of like you get the answer back on your test and you're like, oh my God, how did I get that wrong? But
Yeah.
anyway, because, yeah, and I mean, I never got into the hype of superhero movies, really. And, you know, as we discussed, like, I don't really go to the movie theater ever anymore. But yeah, it's weird that I had never seen this until 2024. I feel like it would have been on TV at some point. Like, I feel like I maybe saw parts of this one on TV, but I can't quite remember it. It's hard because as much as I enjoy Ryan Reynolds, he is incredibly one note. So it could have been any number of Ryan Reynolds movies that I'm attributing to this one.
The first Blade is such an interesting choice for being that kind of a superhero film because Anton, Blade was never a huge Marvel character.
Not a huge
My understanding is that they chose him. New Line Cinema chose to adapt it because it was inexpensive to do, and it ended up. Of course, all the movies are rated R. That alone makes it distinct, especially for that era. R-rated superhero films. This was the only one that existed back then. They are a little bit more common now. Something like the Deadpool films, I think, are rated R, right?
Yes, they are.
And
but
like the Wolverine was famously rated R. But back 20 plus years ago, this was a bit of a unicorn. There was nothing else like it.
right, and just kind of goes to show like there was a lot of risks, or at least like even just so obscure to pick. One, he's like one of the few black superheroes in Marvel that has his own title. They decided to make him the first Marvel film. Like you said, R-rated film, very violent. And again, just a very obscure title. Not really. I think at the time there was one comic book run. Otherwise, Blade really is just a supporting character in a lot of different series like Ghost Rider. So there wasn't really a huge reason to see like why something like Blade was going to be that first film.
And yeah, it was a sleeper hit when it came out in 98. The second one that we talked about, directed by Del Toro, did even better and is a very well-regarded sequel.
Do you guys remember there was like a really big thing about like vampire supernatural films in the early 2000s?
Yes.
There was
Yeah.
just like, because there was Blade, of course. There was the Underworld series.
Right.
30 Days of Night. Did that come out around
That was
now?
in like the later 2000s, but
Okay.
even in the early 2000s, of course, right? There was the Underworld series, Van Helsing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The
And then mid 2000s was
yeah.
everybody was getting horny for vampires and werewolves, right? With the
Yeah.
Twilight series.
Yeah.
Yeah, Twilight came a little
I know that
later,
was
and then
big
True
before-
Blood on HBO.
Yeah.
Blade, very different take on vampires than that other stuff. This did not romanticize vampires at all.
No, it was very much like something out of a comic book.
Right. So can I ask you guys a question? And this has been bothering me and it's in my notes. Why is it that like the moment, and I don't know, maybe this is explained in the second one. Again, I have gaps in I'm a very busy man. I'm so sorry. I have not seen the second. But like, why is it that the moment they become a vampire, they just become gigantic pieces of crap? Like, couldn't a vampire be like, oh, well, I have to eat human blood, but I'm going to Dexter it, right? I'm going to kill, criminals and drink their blood and do stuff like that. Like, and I would, here's my thought is it has something to do with the soul, right? Because vampires are dead and they have no souls. But at the same time, why is it that like, oh, I'm a vampire. Well, now I'm a bad guy,
Yeah, I always interpret it as because they're overtaken by the thirst, and the thirst is what drives them.
Okay.
But that is slightly addressed in the second one.
Okay.
There is a little more nuance to some of the vampire characters in the second one.
Okay.
So my answer to you regarding this third film would be piss poor writing, because it doesn't make sense, because Goyer, who wrote and directed this film, he wrote the first two. So there's a lot of, I would say, inconsistencies in this film that we're going to get to.
But they were still that way in the first film. Like, in the first film,
They were.
Spoiler alert, like, he meets his mom at the end of the first one, right? And she's just, oh, well, because I'm a vampire, I'm just a complete piece of crap. Like, you know, and even though you're my son, like, oh, we have to do evil things. That irked me, and I just didn't know if maybe, because Anton, I know you're a bit more well-versed in the comics, if that was explained maybe, or expanded upon.
Well, I guess if I have to think about it even from like a writing perspective, if it was easier for if it was easier for people not to give in to their bloodthirsty vampire thirst, then why would Blade want to kill a bunch of them?
Right. Yeah.
Watch the second one.
Yeah.
I will. I will.
It's good. There was hype for this film. Anton, did you see this in the theater?
Yes, I did.
Oh, so you did. I'm sorry.
That's a waste of a ticket.
You paid money.
Yeah,
I did too. And it was interesting because by 2004, of course, Snipes was definitely not the megastar that he had been in the 90s, but he was still Wesley Snipes. This was before he went to prison. This is before he started getting involved in selling DVDs out of the back of his truck. You know, so he was still a star.
What did I say? I have something in my notes that says Blade 3 receding hairlines. It's like, now, he comes up and I'm like, did you shave? Like,
yeah, don't get me
the widow speak.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like I touched on it earlier, Wesley Snipes did have a bit of a downfall, but the dude was more than an actor. He was a Renaissance man. Just really loved the craft. Eamon Ra, the production company we mentioned, that's his production company.
Yeah, he's an executive producer on this film, which we're going to touch on that.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to be very harsh on Snipes throughout this episode, but like I really love the guy's work in the 90s, and watching this and talking about this is almost painful for me, just based on how much of a fan I was of his earlier stuff.
Yeah.
Anton, this came out in 2004. The superhero genre had changed since the first film came out. This should have really slotted right in. Spider-Man was taking off, like we mentioned. X-Men was taking off. We knew Batman was coming back the next year. But there were certainly misfires. Hulk, Daredevil, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Catwoman. So by this point,
Elektra, Fantastic Four.
Oh boy, that was the same time. Right.
Yeah.
Oh shit, yeah.
Blade Trinity should have slotted right into this, and it just didn't. It did not make much money when it came out. It didn't do well critically. This ended up with a 24% Rotten Tomatoes score. Yuck.
Well, why don't we go ahead and dive into this production history and really dig into this film?
Let's do it. So in 2001, before the release of Blade 2, New Line Cinema made a deal with David Goyer to write and produce a third Blade film. Guillermo del Toro passed on directing this when his passion project, Hellboy, another comic book movie, got the green light. Del Toro did conceptual artwork for this film, and he was actually thanked in the end credits. Now, German director Oliver Hirschbiegel was in talks to direct the film, but he chose instead to direct a film about Adolf Hitler called Downfall. Awesome movie, by the way, if anyone's ever seen it. Stephen Norrington, who of course directed the first Blade film, he was considered to do this one, but he changed his mind after reading the script, which he didn't like. Wow, the rare smart move from Stephen Norrington. Good thing that worked out for him, Anton. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which he ended up directing, and which killed his career. He never worked again.
It sucks because like maybe it's nostalgia, and I know you guys did an episode on that one, right?
Oh yeah,
yes we did.
I low-key really liked that movie.
We didn't hate it.
There were cool things about it.
It's a guilty pleasure of mine.
It's sad, yeah, but it's sad that it torpedoed someone's career. I did not know that.
Oh, it ended Norrington's career. Yeah.
It ended a few careers when we look back on it.
Yeah, Eric, this may shock you, but he didn't get along with Sean Connery.
I mean, I imagine Sean Connery's not an easy guy to get along with. I think he's a cool guy. I'm not saying anything bad, like, you know.
I think he was one of those guys where, like, if you were cool with him, he was a great friend.
Oh, yeah.
But if you weren't, good luck.
Yeah.
Back to Blade Trinity. Goyer is actually friends with Stephen Norrington, according to the research, and Del Toro. He asked for their advice when it came to directing. I don't know how much that helped him. Poor
they
guy.
told him to run.
Yeah. Wesley Snipes actually starred in an earlier film directed by Goyer called Zigzag. I've never seen it, but I found that interesting in the research, considering how their relationship on this film went. An early idea by Goyer for the film was to be set many years after the events of Blade 2, where vampires had actually achieved world domination and enslaved all humans, and Blade would be the last hope for humanity. His slower aging could be explained by his vampire blood, but this storyline was deemed too dark and it was later dropped.
They made it though, right? That movie Daybreakers.
They made this movie. It was called Matrix Revolutions.
Yes, and the sequel to that was The Towering Inferno. So the vampire final solution in this film originally came from an idea in Blade in the first film trilogy, in the first film. In a deleted scene for that film, Deacon Frost shows Karen Jensen a prototype of harvesting human bodies, which can actually be found on the Blade DVD. I think it's on YouTube.
Yep, I've
as
seen
well.
that. Again, this was also seems like it was in the Matrix.
You could almost say Blade was the first film to actually feature bullet time, preceded the Matrix by a year.
I was going to say that the Matrix came out in '99, right?
Yep.
And I was sitting there watching the first Blade. I was like, this reminds me a whole hell of a lot of the Matrix.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Like,
it's interesting. Anton, why don't you finish this production history? I don't want to talk about this production anymore.
So, in the original screenplay, Blade was cured completely and became a natural human. And the film would have ended with Blade standing on a cliff and then throwing his sword into the sea below before walking away into the nearby forest. Colin Farrell was offered the role of Hannibal King, but turned it down. This led to Ryan Reynolds being cast. Jessica Biel was cast shortly after. Now, Snipes ended up being extremely unhappy with Goyer being chosen to direct, and we're going to touch more on this. Now, filming lasted from September 2003 to January 2004, taking place primarily in Vancouver. The film crew was forced to be selective in their shots for various green screen segments, because neighboring stages were being used for the filming of I, Robot and the Chronicles of Riddick, and those sets would sometimes appear within the frames and edited out later. Now, after this film, the live-action film rights reverted to Marvel Studios. Marvel Studios went on to develop a new film with the character and even had discussions with Wesley Snipes about reprising the role. However, Marvel cast Mahershala Ali, himself the subject of fan-made artwork promoting his casting as Blade before he was officially cast. Did want to point, though, Wesley Snipes did give, huge rounds of support for Mahershala Ali, though. So, good on Wesley Snipes to do that.
How long has this film been in development, the new Blade? Because I feel like it's been 10 years.
A long time. You actually get his voice as Blade in the end of the Eternals film as a bit of a teaser, like, oh, Blade's coming.
In Eternals film?
Yeah.
We'll all look forward to that.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why.
Didn't that come out 3 years ago?
Yeah.
And they still don't have a director for the new one.
No director, no idea.
That's a really bad sign, because that's what happened with World War Z. It's just 10 years in production and reshoots and stuff.
Are we sure this isn't money laundering?
Oh, Snipes did go to jail for tax evasion, right?
He sure did.
Yeah. So,
and his production company was involved in the process.
Oh,
of course it was.
So,
man.
Shall we? Before we go into the reasons, of course, of why this film wasn't better, shall we take a break?
Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. And we're back. You were just talking about Wesley Snipes, Anton. Why don't we start with him?
Oh, man. Snipes man himself.
This is going to be strange because he's probably the biggest reason why this film didn't work. And it's bizarre to me because the first two films were so good and he was the best thing about them. But this particular film really lived and died on the strength of Wesley Snipes.
Yeah. And I hope you can sort of give me a little bit more background. I saw the first Blade. Yes, he's supposed to be this very understated character, right? Typically when vampires are represented, the badass ones especially, they don't have a lot of emotion. But I felt like he was able to convey emotion doing that in the first one. Why in this one And I mean, I'm sure there's myriad reasons. It really feels like he does not care.
Oh man, I feel like it's the tightrope of Snipes didn't care, but Snipes cared too much. Or there's a bit of, we have to always kind of put into context where he was in his career at this point.
Uh-huh.
After Blade made the first Blade made $150 million at the box office off of a fairly like meager budget.
Mhm.
Dude was rocking, multimillionaire. He's given a Hollywood star, given honorary degrees left and right. Very big star in Hollywood. And not only that, he's also been has a lot of critical acclaim to him as an actor that Pat already, touched on. So at this point in his career, Wesley Snipes, it's fair to say Wesley Snipes had a bit of an ego to him. Would you agree, Pat?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this is not just our opinion. There's countless things you can read online about his behavior with some of his stars on different films and his decision making regarding maybe some of his female co-stars on some other films. This one is kind of where I think it all crested, and this was really the beginning of the end for him. We mentioned how he didn't like that David Goyer was chosen to be the director. He protested this. I was confused by this, Anton. Maybe, I don't know if you were able to dig up anything because Snipes was one of the producers, but apparently he didn't have a say in Goyer being hired, or maybe it was after the fact when they were filming that he soured on Goyer. But I guess he seemed to have limited decision-making power on the production of this.
Yeah, I was also surprised to see that, and it couldn't have been just after he soured on it, because there's so many stories of just really bad relationship on set and just manifesting in the most bizarre ways.
I don't know how it went downhill, but something got me curious about this. So I own Blade 2 on DVD,
Mhm.
and there is a commentary track which features Wesley Snipes and David Goyer. And that, of course, was recorded after Blade 2 came out in 2002. So not long before this, right? On the commentary track together, it really seems like they're friends. They seem very jovial. They seem to be poking fun at each other in a very good-natured way. So it's like they clearly got along very shortly before this film started. So something must have happened during the production of this. That's the thing that I'm just not sure about. Like, what caused the relationship to go bad? I just don't know.
And just to kind of touch on how does that poor relationship manifest, we're gonna talk about Patton Oswalt a little bit more. But there are really famous interviews where even Patton Oswalt talks about being on set and Wesley Snipes is only communicating through Post-it notes, even to Goyer. And he's not only communicating only through Post-it notes, he's signing them as Blade. And so I don't know if that's method acting. I don't know. Again, you see what I mean, Eric, about caring a little too much or not caring at all.
Well, okay. I need to break that down for a minute.
Yeah, the listeners can't see this, but Eric just looked at Anton like he had three heads.
I'm telling you, it is.
Because here's the thing, you just sat here and were like, oh, he's a Renaissance man and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, he can be all those things, but if your ego's all the way up there, and I mean, like, and if he's an executive producer on it, which I know is kind of like, depends on the executive producer, right? It's
he had a stake in the film. He had a financial stake in it.
He had a financial stake in the film. Something must have happened personally between him and the director, because if what you're telling me is true, like, why wouldn't he just try? And like, I personally, like, let's say, that's his legacy, right? Like, that's how he got his start. I mean, yeah, he's done all this other stuff, but a lot of people equate Wesley Snipes to Blade. And when you're that closely related to a character, wouldn't it be in your own best interest to do your best as that character all the time, even if you're mad? Like, it doesn't come across to me as like the Post-it thing sort of seems like a green M&M's thing. Do you know that story in the music industry?
Right,
yes.
It's part of the writer.
Right, yeah. It's part of the writer, but the reason that they did that was because they were one of the first bands who had pyrotechnics, so they wanted to make sure that they were being taken care of. So it came off as this prima donna thing. I don't know, maybe he was trying to method act, but like, I don't see Blade communicating Post-it notes anywhere in the films. No. That just, it's, I feel bad for the crew. Can you imagine like all the people who are there to like do their work, and here's a guy communicating through Post-it notes. Like,
Well, it's not the worst thing he did on set.
No, it
So-
gets worse, Eric.
oh no, don't tell me that.
It does.
Ugh.
So Snipes and Chris Christopherson, who plays Whistler, right?
Yeah.
They were good friends. Christopherson was also unhappy with the movie, especially with Goyer's script decisions. Both of them felt that too many new characters had been added. They didn't feel that Blade needed any sidekicks. I can understand that.
I agree with all those
Mhm.
points.
Oh, Snipes absolutely had some valid points. Now, how he went about acting on those thoughts is another conversation. Snipes caused difficulty throughout filming. He would frequently refuse to shoot scenes. He would not show up without announcement on certain days. It would force Goyer to use stand-ins and computer effects to add his character to scenes. There is, of course, a very famous meme where Snipes was on set and he refused to open his eyes for the take, so they used CGI, and it looks as bad as you think it does.
What scene is that?
Anton, I think it's in the climax.
Yeah, he's on the gurney or the.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the most famous example of this.
Listen, I get it, because like trying to think of how to explain this in a way that I won't get in trouble. Where I work in my day job, because I have not been able to quit that yet. It wasn't sold, but there is a company that is running it. I do not like that company, and I have been actively working against them. But it to the benefit of the company. You know what I mean? It's okay to work against stuff if it benefits the final product.
Yeah,
And like,
I don't know what this was.
He's not a dumb guy,
No.
right? Like,
Eh.
I mean, he did go to
you
prison
guys
for
were
tax
just
evasion.
singing his praises.
Look,
Look,
What
I
is
have a
that?
lot of
Yeah.
respect for the guy, but he apparently thought he just didn't have to pay taxes, which is not going to work.
Well, yeah, but there's
That was
a lot.
that was a bad
yeah,
decision,
he-
Wesley.
he went to
I-
super jail for that.
I
Yeah.
know, but like, there's a lot of people out there who think that they shouldn't pay taxes. That's not the weirdest thing about it.
It's not
The
smart.
It's not, but the weirdest thing about it is like, this is his art, man. You were just
You're right.
saying like he is dedicated to his art, and like, even if you hated the final product, if your hands were tied and it was like, people are going to remember this, maybe try.
Can I give you some more?
Oh,
There's a lot more. We're only scratching the surface here.
Yes.
So David Goyer described the making of this film as, quote, the most personally and professionally difficult and painful thing I've ever been through, end quote. So Anton mentioned the Post-it notes, the communication method that Snipes used. He would sign them, of course, from Blade. Here are some of them. Blade is going to his trailer. Get Blade a coffee.
no. Wait.
Right, can I?
No, that is not signing off as Blade. That is speaking about himself in the third person as Blade.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's worse.
Yes.
That's a whole lot worse
Well,
than what you told me.
Hang on. There's this. We can keep going here. Snipes allegedly referred to Ryan Reynolds as cracker numerous times.
I wish they
And-
included that in the dialogue in the film.
That would have
'Cause
been.
it was-
See, that would have been okay if it was in the film.
Because that was actually, it was close enough. I actually really did like their chemistry. It was close enough that it would have been more hilarious if he just kept calling Hannibal King a cracker the whole film.
Patton Oswalt, who Anton mentioned, he alleged that Snipes spent so much time in his trailer smoking weed, and at several points he became violent with Goyer after accusing Goyer of racism. He tried to strangle him, which is Anton and I call the Spreewell.
What?
The Spreewell. That's an
It's
NBA
a-
reference.
a
Latrell
Warrior-
Spreewell choked
Warriors
out one of his
reference.
coaches in the
Oh.
90s.
Okay.
So this makes me think of that.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah, Anton, I think Goyer told Snipes to put a little more mustard on his lines.
But instead of shipping him out to another team, they decided to keep him around.
They kept him around. Anton, I'm kind of wondering this. Who do you think was better at choking out one of their coworkers, Wesley Snipes or Latrell Sprewell? Sprewell gets bonus points because he came back and tried to do it again.
Yeah, but then I just thought about it. Like, Wesley Snipes just has more range, so he'd be able to display that. And
I
take
think I'd be
and
more
multiple
wary of
takes.
Snipes because of his like black belt prowess.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That was like a real choke out. You know what I mean?
I'm sure he was acting it out as Blade, and he said, "This is from Blade."
Blade is coming to choke you out.
Snipes also allegedly made threats towards Oswald and Ryan Reynolds.
Like
The Reynolds thing I can understand.
No,
I get it.
Okay, listen. Like, I don't think they're bad guys. It's just
No.
like sometimes their comedy is a little annoying. And I yelled at you about this because you're like, "Oh, I hate Ryan Reynolds."
Yeah, I'm not a
like,
fan.
Okay, fine, but like he's just like every other one-note actor that's out there. Will Ferrell. Why am I only thinking of Will Ferrell?
But that's a different
I can't
thing.
even tell you how much I disagree with that.
You see,
Ryan Reynolds wouldn't have made it through the first audition at Saturday Night Live.
Ryan Reynolds.
Disagree with that.
Yeah. So Ryan Reynolds was at that point in his career very much so just like a frat movie like actor, like either doing romantic comedies or just like very sophomore humor.
At this point in his career, he hadn't done anything except Van Wilder.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying, dude. So like he too, like this was like his second big thing.
Yeah.
Like, of course he's
we have a whole section about him that we're going to get to.
Fine.
Back to the Snipes of it all. So, I mean, Eric, this is like a real tangible effect on the production. He was late or didn't show up so many times that it actually delayed the production for days. He was showing up so inconsistently, they couldn't fire him.
Mm-mm.
So they just shot entire scenes of the movie without him. So in the movie, you probably noticed that there's scenes where you're like, why isn't Blade here? Yeah, they just decided to film it without him.
Or he had a stunt double, right? I mean, I imagine he did.
Yeah, and they would give your boy Ryan Reynolds more dialogue.
Do you ever wonder why the opening narration is Ryan Reynolds?
I did immediately when I was seeing it in the theater. I'm like, who's this?
I mean, from the opening where it's like they flip off the sun, I'm like, it's gonna be that kind of movie. It's like it's gonna be.
Now I will say this about Snipes. In an interview with The Guardian, he denied this version of events, and he said that as an executive producer of the film, he had the authority to make decisions, and that some people had difficulty accepting that.
But if the decision is that I'm not going to show up to set for shooting today, like that's a pretty juvenile decision. And also,
it's a decision. It's a choice.
Well, it's the antithesis of your actual job title on both accounts. You're the actor and the executive producer.
It's like Snipes took just every juvenile thing he did, stripped it to its bare bones. Like objectively, that's what I did, and that's the quote he gave for the interview, which essentially is what it was.
I don't like it.
I'll say something in Ryan Reynolds' defense. This may make you happy, Eric. He and Jessica Biel do an audio commentary on the DVD.
Oh my God, I bet that's actually funny.
It's very enjoyable. They are very careful to make comments about Snipes, but it's clear that he was impossible to deal with based on what they were saying. It is really worth a listen. You might be able to find it on YouTube, actually. At one point, they are discussing a scene, like we just mentioned, that was supposed to have Snipes in it, and they're like, yeah, and he just didn't show up, so Goyer rewrote the scene, and we filmed it without him. So, like, that's not a rumor. Like, that's actually confirmed by Snipes' co-stars. This isn't just internet rumors.
Yeah, I mean, imagine so, but it's just still.
He apparently pushed for a sex scene with Jessica Biel. Now, I've also heard that he was opposed to this. I don't know. It's just something, again, this is stuff you can dig up online. Although he did push for the sex scene with Jennifer Lopez in Money Train. So there was historical precedent for this.
I like to think that in the, while pushing for it, he said, and I have to keep the sunglasses on.
That's like, God.
You won't be able to see where I look.
Oh, man.
There's more, of course. I mean, Snipes was upset about a number of things. He allegedly wanted more black representation. He wanted to be included in the pre-production, and he wasn't. Again, not really sure why he wasn't included in the pre-production. He was an executive producer.
Okay.
The one thing I really understand his umbrage with was he didn't like the Night Stalkers and how they were upstaging Blade. Like, I can understand that. Like, he's the star of the film. He doesn't want to share the screen with someone like Ryan Reynolds. Totally understandable.
And, like, I understand that, too, from, like, you could have cut almost all, you could have left, like, 2 people in the Night Stalkers, and, like, that would have been fine. And I talked to you, Pat, when we were talking about it, I was like, there's glimpses of Wesley Snipes being golden. You know what I mean? There's glimpses. I would have liked, and you said maybe happens in the second movie, if Ryan Reynolds' character and Blade's character were sort of combined. Not obviously, they're 2 different people, but like have Blade be a bit more witty. Because
you need to see the second one. He cracks some jokes in the second one. It's fun.
But then why didn't they do it in this one?
I don't know why. I bet
Makes
you
no
Wesley
sense.
Snipes has a lot of free time. You could email him and ask him.
I guess
That's why this movie's so frustrating, though, Eric. You're right. Like there are a couple glimpses in this film where you're like, "Oh, that's Blade. That's the Blade that I know."
Or like even the humans being harvested. I know we sort of talked. It's derivative of a couple different things, but I thought that scene was actually pretty cool and pretty,
It is, but it goes nowhere.
It wasn't gory. It was like there's sparks. There's like real quick sparks of something better, and I think that's why it hurts more.
Yeah. Look, I think we can all agree. Snipes had legitimate gripes about some of the decision making on Goyer's part, right? But there's just no excuse for this lack of professionalism. Like this is some of the funniest production. This is some of the funniest troubled production stuff that I've ever done research for on this podcast so far. We're like 90-ish episodes in, and like this is one of the funnier productions.
It's the most out of this world in terms of we've talked about actors that have had big egos on set, but this really just takes the cake in terms of horrible to work with.
And to top everything off, a year after the film came out, he sued New Line Cinema and David Goyer over, citing a number of concerns that we've already mentioned. I don't really know how it was settled, if at all, but I don't know if it ended well for him because I think by 2006, he's in court and going to prison. So,
yeah.
Look, I think in regards to everything that we're talking about, Eric, you're like, well, why wasn't he more invested in this? My theory on this is that the financial, let's call them troubles that he was experiencing, they were already catching up to him by 2004, and he had far bigger fish to fry than being Blade.
Yeah, my take on it was, yes, he does Blade Trinity, but he's just saying yes for the paycheck. Couple that with frustration of knowing that this is really just a film to get a Night Stalkers TV series putting Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel on the forefront. He knows he's getting replaced, and he knows that they want to shine on the younger talent.
I get all that, but the movie's still called Blade, and
I agree.
He is Blade.
He's
it's
on
a terrible
the
decision on the studio's part.
The tone of the poster looks so cool, but
and I get too that like it sounds like he had good ideas and everyone was like, oh, you just go and sit over there. Which would piss me off too. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's so much different than like if you're at a job you don't like and you torpedo a project before you quit, right? Like this is him. This is a
his
legacy.
Baby.
Yeah. So like even if you had all these grievances, at least in my head, and I'm not him, I don't know what was going on, but like I would be like, I'm going to try my best. And if this is how I go out, I'm going to go out swinging. And people are going to know that this failure wasn't my fault.
I don't think it was his number one priority in 2004.
Fair enough.
Patton Oswalt said, quote, if you just sit and watch Blade Trinity, it's a D-. It just doesn't work. But if you know what they went through to get that movie made, it's an A+. The fact that the movie exists puts it above Citizen Kane, end quote.
Oh, Patton Oswalt. His interviews are pretty hilarious.
Yeah, he's done a number of interviews about this film. They are great. Look, here's the reason why I don't have any sympathy for Snipes here. He was paid $13 million for this film.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, it's not like you're losing your paycheck.
Right.
Because the movies, you still got paid.
Where was that money going, though? I don't know. He might not have either. I don't know.
Not to the U.S. government.
That's correct.
Not to the U.S. government.
Like quick sidebar on that. Anton, how much do you think Steven Seagal celebrated when Snipes went to prison? Because that meant he was able to dominate the direct-to-video market.
Well, we'll talk about Steven Seagal more in a near future episode, but
oh yeah, Zabba.
Don't do it. You're going to the dark side.
We have to do it. He was a legit star.
Steven Seagal content.
Zabba.
What?
That also cook.
Okay, pump the brakes. Legit star.
He was for a brief period of time. He was.
He was
like
at a certain
one
point.
Movie.
No, he was in a bunch of stuff.
And
was his acting ever good though?
No, it wasn't.
No.
Stop. Let me paint the picture
for you, Eric. We are covering a film in a couple weeks called On Deadly Ground. He was a big enough star that a studio let him direct his own movie.
Oh no.
It was the only one he ever directed. They never let him do it again.
Right.
Look, it was over real quick for him, but from like 1988 to 1994, he was a star.
Whatever you say, Pat. I'm excited for the episode.
It's going to be a doozy.
Uh,
Back to Snipes. How many lines do you think he had in this film?
What is it? Maybe 5 minutes of dialogue?
Any guesses? Total lines?
I'm gonna say, and I think this is high. I'm gonna say 20.
It's higher than that. According to IMDb, it's higher than that.
Well, I put my guess in. It wouldn't be fair if I guessed again. So, Anton.
I'm gonna go 80 lines.
You're not far off. It is according to IMDb less than 100.
Yeah,
Ugh.
no, it's
Star of the film, less than 100 lines.
Well, 5 minutes of dialogue, like,
That might be right.
It's hard for me to like conceptualize it. Like 80 lines to me sounds like a lot. And I starred as Macbeth in 6th grade, so I know a little bit about lines. Okay, but
yeah,
like, so that's why the minutes of dialogue is helpful. He's hardly talks.
Yeah, I think I knew that it was really hard for production. One of the scenes that really displayed that was when they were like, all right, let's go beat up a bunch of familiars. And literally all of the scenes was just Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds. There wasn't any of like Wesley Snipes beating up anyone until they get to the scene where they're dangling the guy at the parking lot.
Right.
Let's move into the next reason why this wasn't better, which is the storytelling. This is going to be a whole thing. I guess the Trinity in the title is that Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel in addition to Blade.
One would assume it could also be Blade, Dracula, and the Pomeranian.
I didn't think about that.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say Dracula?
Or wait. Sorry. The actual Trinity is the amount of H's in Triple H's name.
Oh, I thought you meant, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say Drake.
And
remember, there's two versions of Drake. We have Monster Drake and Ecstasy Seller Drake.
You mean Miami Drake?
Yeah, Miami. Yeah, South Beach Club Drake.
I don't know. It's a vibe, though. If I were an ancient being of inconceivable power, I'd dress like that.
He looks like he would invite you to an after party at a nightclub.
Lots of small bones.
Well, he has good cocaine. You just might not be alive the next day.
Yeah, because you drank your blood.
Right. Well, like most nightclub owners.
Yes.
It just comes with the territory, though.
So the film starts off with Ryan Reynolds narrating, Anton, as you pointed out. I remember sitting in the theater thinking, like, uh-oh.
Which, Pat, I know you have a displeasure for Ryan Reynolds. I like Ryan Reynolds.
I like Ryan Reynolds too, Anton.
I'm not a fan. Yeah. Let me ask you both this, though. So you both like him for his comedy.
Yes.
When he starts off narrating a film that is intended to not be a comedy, can you take it seriously?
No.
Especially when he utters the line, but the movies don't mean shit.
The tone was completely off for the film for a lot of reasons.
Awful.
Completely off.
I don't even think he might have been the best casting for this. And again, I like it. Like, Pat, I'm not disagreeing with you that he gets a bit annoying in the film, but I think there's a little bit more there going on as to, like, because it's hard to ad-lib stuff, and he does okay. I mean, this is probably gonna have to be bleeped, but cock juggling thunder cunt is amazing.
We don't have to bleep that. We can leave it in. It's a line from the film.
That is absolutely fantastic.
It doesn't fit in this movie at all. But
no, it doesn't. But okay, but it's because they were like, oh well, Blade's not here. So
I'll say this for Ryan Reynolds. He did what they asked him to do.
Right. That's what an actor does.
Yes, he did what they asked him to do.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it before, that just because an actor is in a bad movie and acts bad in a bad movie, it doesn't mean it's the actor's fault.
No, I don't think he's one of the 5 biggest problems with this film.
Even though I like him, I might say, he is. It's off. It's off. It doesn't.
But is it because of him? Again, is it because of him or because of the way the film was cut?
No, it's
really
not
put
because
him in the
of him.
forefront.
They gave him more lines because Wesley Snipes wasn't showing up and didn't participate. So they were like, Ryan, what do you got?
And then
and that's not even giving him lines. It's just like, oh, well, I guess you got to say something, and at least he pulls something vaguely entertaining out of his butt. You know what I mean?
Oh, he sure pulled it out of his butt.
So critical, Patrick.
Well, Snipes was critical, too. He called the humor juvenile, and he hated the script. It's like, why didn't you just show up more and try to help it?
Why?
It's true.
why didn't he show up onto set and just start ad-libbing some badass stuff?
I'll say this. There was a lot in the Blade Trinity that looked like it was starting to move more towards trying to appeal to a younger, different audience than the first 2 Blade films. Now, of course, you have Jessica Biel putting in the earphones, and because she moves to the beat of her own music.
Ugh.
I like to think she was slaying vampires while listening to Jennifer Lopez.
We can't talk about that yet because I can't.
Bring it up again though, because I have points to make.
Rock bottom.
And the other side of it is, if they're already going to think about putting together a new, series of the Night Stalkers with a younger cast, it makes sense that the film's going to actually put them more front and center. And so,
and Anton, resident comic book expert, the Night Stalkers, that's a real thing.
That is a real thing. There are a group in the comics.
Okay. See, that adds more context for me because I didn't know that. I was like, oh, this is dumb direction they're taking this in. But apparently, okay.
But there was
at least it came from somewhere.
Right.
My primary problem with the storytelling in this film is that, comparing it to the first 2, Eric, I know you've only seen the first one, but bear with me here. The first movie has really good world building. Within 20 minutes, it does a really good job of establishing this alternate vampire world, how they operate in society, in the shadows. They influence the government, they influence the police, they own a lot of real estate. It does a really good job of setting all that up and making it believable within the context of the film. Wesley Snipes, perfectly cast. The action scenes are just the right amount of cheesy. There's things about the first film that are dated, but there's a nice campiness to it. I think it holds up pretty well for the most part, apart from the CGI, but whatever.
Yeah, the one-liners are always perfect because of the way Blade just has such a dry delivery, but it's in the perfect time. It fits the tone of the film.
I really need to see the second one. Again, I'm really not trying to be contrarian here. I saw it. I did not see it in 1998 when I was a lot younger. Cards on the table, I would rate Blade probably a C. I actually wasn't that impressed by it. I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think it was but the other thing is too is that I feel like everybody built it up.
And you're speaking on the first Blade film?
The first Blade. Yeah.
So it didn't touch your heart to see the opening of that film during the vampire rave scene and Blade just murking vampires.
Yes, that was cool, but come on, it's a blood rave. We've all been to those in college.
Who hasn't been to a blood rave?
Who hasn't been to a blood rave, dude? If you haven't been to a blood rave, you're a prude. Come on. No, and yes, that was cool.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, Eric.
You're saying the world building is so incredible. It's very simple though, because it's
all I meant about that was within 20 minutes you're like, oh, okay, that's how the vampire stuff works. Cool.
It's not because I still have so many questions
in this film,
all of them. Well, I haven't seen the second one.
You need to,
but it's they're yeah, well, we run the government and real estate and stuff like that, and it's okay, but so is the 1% just vampires? And
probably
no. They say it in the first film. They have a treaty with the human leaders, and they have an agreement. We will keep to ourselves,
but they don't.
They do. Remember Deacon Frost in the first film, he's trying to upset all that. And even the elders are telling him yo, don't do this.
But I also don't understand why. It's sort of like the Harry Potter thing, right? Where it's oh, we have to be very secretive because if we scare the humans, they'll kill us all. And it's dude, brother, you have wands that shoot fire.
No,
You'll be fine.
That's not why they're secretive in Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's very different. Yeah,
Harry Potter, they're secretive because they maintain that if they reveal themselves to the Muggles will be looking to magic to solve all their problems, and they don't want to deal with that.
Oh, well, that's not what I gathered from. I never read the books.
Well, I read the books.
I read some of the books.
Okay, I read the book. Harry Potter's the one thing I will nerd out on.
I love
not
Harry
the
Potter.
only one thing.
Not the only thing, but
do not get me wrong.
Well, Anton, it's the one thing I would actually. It's one of the few things I'll actually consider myself an expert on.
Okay. So then pause right there. Then but my whole reasoning here is still valid for the vampires. I don't understand why the vampires couldn't just take over. wouldn't it make more sense for the vampires to get rid of the middleman, become the main leaders, and like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know.
That's what they're sort of trying to do in this film, I guess.
Yeah, I think what they were kind of hinting at is being able to take over the world entirely also requires needing like a food source, but not wanting to upset that food source ecosystem.
Like, it would have made more sense if, like, oh yeah, the police hire the vampires to kill like I said before, like to kill criminals, and like, oh, they disappeared, but like they were all eaten. Also, in the beginning of this movie, is Drake eating other vampires?
I think they're humans. Wait, no, they're definitely humans because vampires can't feed on vampires.
Yeah,
I don't think. I don't know, man.
But I mean,
none of this is explained in the film.
He ripped another vampire's head off.
Right. When
they woke him up.
Right.
And like, I get that if somebody wakes me up like that.
Look, the point I'm making about the storytelling, Blade 2 was a perfect sequel. This movie just takes a dump on both those films.
And it has that early 2000s like coloration where everything's like a gray, blue, green.
Awful.
Like
a soulless vampire.
No, you're right.
Yeah. And that's like everything in this era was like coming out like that.
Funny enough, Ryan Reynolds fit perfectly in that atmosphere.
He's just cracking jokes left and right, and look, we just covered it. Like, we know why he was doing it. He wasn't needed.
And
no, most of the whatever they're called weren't needed.
The Night Stalkers.
Yeah,
we needed more Triple H in this film.
We didn't. We did not.
You're right. We needed more Eddie Guerrero, which we didn't get at all.
Here's a stupid plot hole for you, Anton. You know when he pulls the arrow out of his eye and it's like a big funny joke thing because they're making fun of him for it?
Right.
So Jessica Biel is an alleged vampire hunter in this film, right? Who hunts vampires. So why would she use an arrow that's not silver tipped? She's just like, I'll just throw in some regular arrows too.
Well, okay. I was going to say wooden stakes because wooden stakes also take down vampires.
Well, it didn't take him down.
Wooden arrow through the heart of a vampire?
I was going to say, but it's going
I'll tell you why, Anton. There's an answer for this, and it's called stupidity. That's why. Because it establishes that the rest of the arrows she's using are either silver tipped or they have like UV bombs in them, which is, I don't know how that works, but.
Well, Underworld sort of did that too.
They did.
They have like the UV bullets.
They did.
Did they have a lightsaber like in this one? It's half as hot as the sun. Idiotic.
That did get me. I was like, bro, everyone in that room would be dead.
Right.
Then.
Of course.
Everyone would be dead.
What do they call it? The Ark or something?
Who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
Anton, you're right, though. They really upped the humor here. And I think you're onto something. They were trying to appeal to a teenage audience, which you didn't get in the first two.
No.
Yeah, who were they trying to appeal to in the first two?
Adults.
Actual nerds.
Adult comic book fans.
Yeah, exactly. They made it really accurate. They had someone like Guillermo del Toro who was able to actually bring like the comic to life with like proper effects and then weave that with excellent storytelling. Then you have Blade Trinity, which is Blade by the CW.
It really is.
It really is.
Gosh, that's correct.
Yeah, seriously. It's
the dialogue too, equally awful. I'm not even just talking about Ryan Reynolds. Even the basic dialogue with like Whistler. This got me in towards the beginning. This is my favorite bit of just terrible exposition where Whistler, he comes back from the car chase and he's like, Blade, killing humans is messy because they don't ask and it leaves bodies. You better hope nobody ID'd you. It's like, well, that's exactly what happened. They've been working together for I would say 30 years. And Whistler delivers this line like it's the first time he's had to tell him, like, if you kill vampires, they turn to ash. But if you kill humans, they leave the body.
Well, and then they kill, 50 police officers later in the movie?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, moot point, dude.
It doesn't end up. Well, he's already killed familiars.
Thousands.
Right?
He even says,
so
I've killed like 1,500 people.
Yeah, so just a weird delivery of a line. Also, it's just fun to think about if Whistler's character actually survived the film and then ended up in Ang Lee's Hulk.
It's Nick Nolte's twin brother.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Similar energy,
I did have one line that hit me so hard, and it's really impactful, and I wrote it down because it was so impactful. It's after they get Blade, and the police officers are arguing about who gets to take Blade, and one of the police officers says, "Don't fuck with my thing." It's so perfect and so awful.
I think Wesley Snipes wrote that line.
Wesley, all the lines that Wesley Snipes wrote were any scenes where all he did was look at Ryan Reynolds and not say anything and just look at him stoically.
After they spring him from jail, that whole Blade being a wanted criminal subplot, it pretty much dies off. It's never really brought up again. And then
Nope.
I think the point you brought up earlier, Eric, or I think maybe you did, Anton, where they're just gallivanting around town trying to kill familiars. It's like, I guess he's not a wanted man anymore.
No.
Well, remember when they're running away and they just like run right out into all the cop cars?
They drive
They're
away
like, "No."
in like a Ford Bronco.
Yeah, no, everything's
It wasn't
fine.
a Ford Bronco, but it's funnier if it was.
Yeah, it would be
Like
funny.
Blade Trinity or Blade the inept police officers. Like what?
They don't chase him.
No, they're just like, "Up, he got in the van. That's safe."
Well, they couldn't afford 2 car
we
chases.
can't,
One was enough.
we can't touch them.
No.
They're in the van now. Oh my goodness.
Here's the other part of it, too. In the first movie, Blade very explicitly explains how vampires move differently, they smell differently. Wouldn't he know that he wasn't killing a vampire? Because remember, he kills the guy with the fake teeth, and the guy's like laughing at him. He's like, "Why aren't you smarter?" It's like, what?
Well, also, it's like, oh, well, if you left the bodies, like, if it was just vampires, they'd all turn to dust. And it's like, brother, you just crashed so many vehicles.
Well,
somebody would have been paying attention.
I do know the reason. Because it was stupid.
The first 2 films establish vampires are physically superior. They're faster. They're stronger than regular humans. And for whatever reason in this film, Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel are able to fight them toe to toe.
Dude, it's beyond that. They are so dumb. They are like in the first. Is it in the first scene where they're like, "Oh, it's Blade. Let's just run right at him."
Yeah.
Hi, Blade.
Yeah, they're coming in.
Oh,
what up? My name's Hannibal King.
Real great survival instincts.
Hey, like, Blade, what's up, man?
Yeah.
We'll talk about Parker Posey, too.
Look, we're going to get people in the YouTube comments that are saying, well, Hannibal King used to be a vampire, and so he knows how to fight them, along with his years of being able to hunt down vampires. But none of that really matters.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It turns into like a lame version of Scooby Gang. Speaking of Ryan Reynolds, back to him real quick. So, after they jailbreak Blade and they bring him back to their hideout, which is on I think it's like a houseboat.
Right.
Some kind of dock.
Yeah,
maybe.
Like some kind of waterfront type of environment. Reynolds, or Hannibal King, which, by the way, stupid name. Maybe it works in a comic book, doesn't work in a movie for me.
It didn't work in the comic.
He's explaining the origins of Dracula, and at one point, you can tell Snipes must have just left for the day, because Reynolds starts staring into the camera, and it basically turns into a voiceover for a trailer. Did you guys notice this? And the scene just transitions into the next one.
I didn't notice, and you want to know why? I was looking for every excuse not to pay attention to this movie.
That portion of the film, there was a lot of effect of just getting narration and exposition with Ryan Reynolds' character.
Awful.
And it just makes it very excruciating.
He starts monologuing. He's like, this guy's been around for thousands of years, and just like the great white shark, he's never had to evolve. And Blade has no reaction because Wesley Snipes very clearly wasn't on set that day.
Even if he was there, he wasn't really there.
No.
Even if he was physically there, he wasn't there.
And we just move on to the montage of the 2 of them, plus sort of Wesley Snipes hunting down the familiars. Another plot hole, Anton. Or Eric, too, because you're here, too. So they're hunting down the familiars, right? And it ultimately leads to them going to the psychiatrist's office.
Right.
So they're implying that they're working their way up the chain. But it's Blade already knows who he is because he met him at the police station. It's why wouldn't they just go to that guy
in the very beginning?
Start. It's almost like they didn't think about this.
But then the way it was written, where it's revealed, oh, he's dead.
And Drake's just there impersonating him for whatever reason.
Why would Drake just reveal himself in the middle of the film like that?
Were you talking about when he disguises himself as Whistler?
No, before that, when they go to the office for that guy.
Oh, right.
And then he takes the
Jarvis from Arrested Development.
He takes the baby ransom.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He takes a baby.
What's with it? What? That's the
Which
second
doesn't
time
make
that a
sense.
vampire was after a baby in this movie.
Yep.
Has that been established in previous movies that babies are like sought after?
Not really.
No, just
Cool.
a really, really dumb writing to raise the stakes.
Also, pretty dumb on Drake's part to arrive at the secret hideout as a dead man. Why did he do that? Was it a psychological thing?
He could have
Do
been
you know-
anyone who was still living. Like one of them, maybe? Or Blade.
Or
Right,
Blade.
and also-
But that
and
would have
also-
required Wesley Snipes being on set. So
And also, I don't want to call CPS or anything, but bringing your daughter, when you are a blind woman, to a secret hideout of people who hunt vampires doesn't seem to be like a very good idea.
well, she didn't know it was secret.
What?
She was blind.
Well, okay, but she can hear, Patrick. She knows what is happening around her.
Did you catch the part where she's using a microscope?
I did. I did see that. Well, I'm also sitting here
Sorry.
like, what is this touchscreen keyboard thing she's using, and now
I don't know.
how does any of that work?
I don't know.
Uh,
At what point, because you know how she's developing the Daystar virus, at what point do
Yeah.
you think the other Night Stalkers is like, does anyone want to like QA her stuff? Do you think it's good?
Like, there's no way to really test this, guys.
Oh, wait, just hold it. We have a whole paragraph that we can talk about the Daystar.
Oh no.
I'm trying to stick in order here because we have, just so the listeners know, we have like 10 pages of notes on this stuff.
Ugh.
Yeah, so let's try to discuss the plot.
No thanks.
So the vampire hierarchy, led by Danica Talos, right, and who is played by Parker Posey. Their plan is to essentially frame Blade for the murder of a human, thus exposing him to the human authorities, basically making him look like a dumbass, right?
Yep.
Okay. How does Drake fit into that plan?
It doesn't.
That plan it doesn't, but that plan also sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Story-wise.
You're right.
Well, because we find out later the cops are already looking for him.
Yep.
The FBI is already looking for him.
Correct.
So it's like, oh, what? He killed, and you already said he's killed thousands of these familiars. This is not the first person he's killed. Maybe it's the first person he's killed on camera, but like they know who he is. They're actively after him, are they not?
This just seems like a messy
They're after
story.
him for the first 20 minutes.
Well,
And then
because then the police chief, who is paid off by is a vampire familiar, he fucks with their thing, and then they're not after him anymore because he fucked with their thing. I just love
he
that
pulls the
line.
jurisdiction
Yeah.
card, and they're like, "You
Yeah.
have to leave."
Don't fuck with my thing.
Yeah, he's like, "Man,
Yeah.
the feds."
I'm sorry. This is probably the most vulgar episode you guys have had, and I
It
apologize.
is, but that's okay.
It's okay.
But I'm quoting the movie.
You
'cause
are?
It's pretty stupid.
All of the plot, though, like I don't understand. So, like, the vampire leaders resurrect Drake to do what? To kill Blade?
Yes.
Hmm.
Because here's
That's
my
it?
understanding. Well, because Blade is a daywalker, and the vampires, because they're incompetent, are having trouble killing Blade. So this is my understanding. They needed some kind of warrior to come and kill Blade, because Drake, the only way that they really got him on their side, because I still think he was eating vampires. I'm not like 100% convinced.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't think
It
so.
doesn't
but
matter because it's still stupid.
Definitely doesn't
but-
matter.
It's like he was there to get rid of Blade so that they could enact their other plans of world domination or whatever.
They didn't need Blade dead to do that, though. And funny you mentioned
It would
this.
help.
I guess, but so according to Patton Oswalt and others, the plot was originally supposed to focus on the harvesting of the humans, but the studio considered this to be too dark, so they pushed for more of the Drake character.
And then left it in anyway.
and then just
Correct.
still left it in.
Yeah.
Like
'Cause
everything.
I agree.
just left
I
it
agree
in.
with you, Eric. It's a really semi-interesting 5-minute part of the film. If they had done more with it, that would have been interesting. But it's so disconnected from everything else in the film.
And I did like it. It's so corny, and I'll admit it, but I thought it was still badass when he's like, you got 20 seconds. And he turns around and says 20 and just shoots him in the
That's
back.
the Blade we wanted to see.
That's the Blade.
I know. So it's almost like that particular scene was out of a much better movie that we don't get.
Yes,
Like,
completely
Yeah.
agree.
you know, I mean,
Or
if you had a problem with it, just take it out. I'm sorry, Anton.
Yeah, no.
Like, if you had a problem with it or you thought it was too dark, why is it in there anyway? You guys are getting more frustrated about this movie than I thought.
I'm so delighted you seem to hate this as much as I do. Because I was worried when you texted me. You're like, I like Ryan Reynolds. I was like, oh no, am I gonna have to?
No, but it's a bad film.
All of the stuff in the first two films made sense within the context of it. Like when the blood doctor lady in the first one, Karen Jensen, that's her character's name.
Hematologist?
That's it. There you go. So it makes sense that she would develop, I think it's like an anticoagulant that she tells him, like, you could use it to blow up some vampire heads. And you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense that she would know how to develop that.
Yeah.
But in here, Anton, give us your take on the Daystar virus.
So it doesn't really make a ton of sense how it spreads or why you really need Dracula for it. And I love the fact that they're like, we don't know if it's going to kill Blade or not, but it's there. It's there, and they decided to write it into this film.
It's because, this is my understanding, and it's still stupid, but it's because he's the first vampire, and they need his genetic code to make the virus effective against all other vampires. Otherwise, the virus, it's my understanding, would only be effective against certain vampires that maybe shared the same DNA. I'm not trying to defend it. That is just my understanding.
I think your understanding is sound, but wouldn't they have needed his blood to test it?
Yeah.
In the film, they're like, you can just find Dracula and inject it right into him and it'll kill everybody.
No. They said we're not sure, but it's the best that we can do.
If they were developing this bullshit virus for years, how did they even know that they needed Drake's blood? It's a really convenient thing that they're like, good thing Drake just got resurrected. Otherwise, this never would have worked.
They would have had no way to know that the missing piece was a vampire that's been in a tomb for thousands of years.
No, again, I'm not saying it's a good reason. That was my, like, they needed like a progenitor DNA to make the virus effective against all vampires so that could be airborne. Oh God, it hurts. It hurts thinking about.
And it just goes airborne throughout the whole world?
Well, no, because
they're still vampires.
They're still fighting the war.
Oh, right.
They're like, at the end of the movie, they're like, this war is not over. And I'm like, then why was the movie? Why was the movie?
I may or may not have turned off the film by this point. Like it was Anton, this was like Exorcist 2 levels of struggle for me to get through.
I had to laugh out loud at how bad some of this film was, or a lot of this film was, so that got me through it. Doesn't make me any happier with what I ended up watching. I'm just too big of a wrestling fan that I actually do smile whenever I see Triple H in a scene, just because of how badly he acts.
Apple swears they didn't pay for product placement in this film.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is a bold-faced lie. There's no other reason. Because, okay, I'm glad you brought this up because this was a huge sticking point with me. You're telling me that this absolute huntress warrior character is not listening to her surroundings whilst she is fighting people. Okay, so that means anybody could come up behind her and just like slit her throat, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I used to live in, it's not a city, but I used to live in Providence, and I would walk everywhere because it's a small city. I learned very quickly, do not listen to your headphones. That is a bad thing to do. Like, you need to be aware of your surroundings just in a city, in a big town. That's pretty much what.
Do you think Apple was so embarrassed by this film? They were like, whoa, we need to distance ourselves from this.
I could see that.
Yeah. I think this is the exact moment when I knew I didn't like Ryan Reynolds, when he utters the line, like, she likes to listen to playlists while she hunts. I'm like, oh, no.
Dude, somebody told him to say that.
I know, but I can't. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I don't like him. I don't think he's funny.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for him personally. I love what he's doing with his soccer club. I love what he's doing with the companies that he owns. I don't care for him as an actor. I'm sorry.
You've never seen a movie that you liked.
I left Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile was not a very good service. So no, I don't. I don't care about that.
But it's amazing. He's literally the perfect Deadpool.
Oh yeah.
Deadpool means nothing to me.
Well,
nothing.
And listen. I liked him in Detective Pikachu. That might be a hot take.
As Detective Pikachu.
As Detective Pikachu. But and you can say whatever you want. I am the one with a Pokemon tattoo. Okay?
That's fair. look, it's subjective. I can't like every actor.
For
He's
sure.
not my cup of tea. That's it. I have nothing against the guy personally.
My wife does not like Will Ferrell. And I grew up with Will Ferrell, so I know I have nostalgia goggles. But, like, still, you know what I mean? Like, it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Right.
I get that.
Right. It's
But
not
I
personal,
wouldn't pin the movie being bad on Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. No. He is not, like I said, he's not the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth biggest problem with this film.
Wait, so Eric, for the caption for this short, can we do Pat hates Blade Trinity because of Ryan Reynolds?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'll at Ryan Reynolds.
You
And I'll
can.
be like,
I would love to have him as a guest. I'm sure he would be a delightful guest.
I know. You say that, but like he's pretty much him, and he doesn't.
Yeah,
again,
like
I like Ryan Reynolds, but I'll be the first one to say he doesn't really act. He's just Ryan Reynolds.
He's himself.
But like
Correct.
at the same time, that's why I love Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum doesn't really act. He's just Jeff Goldblum. But I love Jeff Goldblum. I just disagree with you about Ryan Reynolds.
That's fine. It's fine.
And it's fine. And it's fine.
It's fine.
I think one of the biggest problems with this film is the director, Goyer. Clearly did not know how to direct this kind of film. He is a writer. He is a very talented writer. He has contributed to many, many good things related to comic books. This is not one of them.
Not at all.
Now, I know you didn't love the first film, Eric, but would you say it had a pretty distinct visual style?
For sure. Yeah. I have to be cognizant of the fact that The Matrix came after it. When you have that tidbit in your head, you're like, oh, The Matrix definitely used this film as inspiration.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'll say it's cool. It did not strike me as other films would have. It wasn't something where I was like, oh my God, like this is the greatest thing. But like, it wasn't bad. And I can see how it influenced action movies that came after it. I think a lot of action movies use the first Blade film as inspirational foundation for their own action scenes.
In
the 90s and early 2000s at the very least.
I've often thought the first two Blade films should be used as templates for how to adapt anime in a live action format. And I wish more anime adaptations looked to those two films.
I can agree with that, yeah.
I can't say the same for this film. The CGI in here, not very good. I don't think any of the action sequences in here can hold a candle to the first two films. Even the opening car chase, from the very get-go, it has that weird choppy editing to it where you can tell they're trying to edit around stuff that they didn't shoot correctly.
Well, and you think about the final battle between Blade and Drake. Like,
sword fight.
Yeah, the sword fight. And it's like, oh, Blade's a sword fighter. And I was like, I'm not an expert on seeing sword fights and stuff like that, but it felt
well, they already did it.
Floppy. Like it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't.
It's
I wasn't
terrible.
on edge. Yeah, I
terrible.
wasn't on edge.
Yeah.
I didn't think that. I didn't care. At the end of the day, I just didn't care.
All of the action has that
movie didn't make
strobe
me care.
effect that they clearly put in post-production because they're like, well, this looks like crap. We better do something about this.
Yeah.
If we edit it and change the angle all the time, you won't notice that it sucks.
Versus the very clear choreography and fighting and just awesome action that you see in the first couple of films that you didn't see as much camera movement at all.
Right.
It looks like a lot of music videos from that era, and that's not a compliment towards this film.
So it was a Korn music video.
In some ways.
That's accurate. I got some sci-fi original series vibes or original movie vibes.
Yeah,
You know,
I can see
like
that.
back in the
Not a
yeah.
tiny budget, $65 million. It was like they had money.
Yeah. It's like $1 for every year that the dinosaurs died.
And it
you
went
know?
all into the theatrical poster.
It all went into
Oh
the
my
theatrical
gosh.
post.
Something
Yeah.
else I noticed too on the last rewatch, which will be the last rewatch for me. I'm never watching this film again. Blade's first line to Whistler on the radio, he says, "I'm at the Stonebridge overpass." I am 99% sure it's not Wesley Snipes' voice.
It did not sound like
It's a lot. There's a lot of ADR in here. There's a lot. I can't think of exact times, but so much ADR.
We touched on the tone earlier. Anton, you nailed this. Like, it is rated R, but it's presented as like a goofball PG-13 type of deal.
Right.
Any scene involving the Night Stalkers or Parker Posey and her minions, it's just if you didn't know any better, you would think you're watching like a Saturday Night Live sketch on like a Blade movie.
That is such a good analogy. That's exactly what it felt like.
Goyer himself wasn't happy with the final product. He said, quote, "I don't think anyone involved in that film had a good experience on it. Certainly I didn't. I don't think anybody involved with that film is happy with the results. It was a very tortured production," end quote.
That's so sad. Because, like, it's even if it's bad, dude, it's like it's still a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, much like Stephen Norrington on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I don't believe Goyer ever directed anything again. He has stuck to screenwriting.
And he's written a lot of screenplays, a lot, like a ton. But yeah, never given the reins to directing ever again.
Yeah.
Did either of you watch the alternate endings?
Yes, I did.
No.
Yeah.
I barely watched the original ending.
Let's just move on to the next reason. Dracula and the rest of the characters. Drake is a terrible villain. He never feels like a threat. This is supposed to be the king of the vampires, and they hired the guy from Prison Break. That's the best that they could come up with.
They're in a major metropolitan city, right? It's not like supposed to be New York or anything. It's just a city, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How is there a store that just sells Dracula bullshit and it is able to remain economically viable so that it is open? And also, why are there two people working there? And one of them is like, oh, well, we've got lunch boxes, we've got this thing, and it's like,
it was the early 2000s. It was still the time where you could go to stores in the mall that for whatever reason all they sold were swords and like really nice fountain pens.
Hot Topic
or Spencer's, dude, but like that was diversified. This was just Dracula shit.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want you to let up on this actor though. His name's Dominic Purcell. Again, nothing personal. He's awful. He is I feel like I'm watching a soap opera actor.
The dude's supposed to be Dracula, and already they reduced him to Drake, and he looks like he smells of bad cologne.
Axe body spray for sure.
Yeah, Axe body spray for sure. Looks like he has he has only two things driving him. It's like look menacing and then deliver your lines as poorly and as dryly as you can.
Well, that's most of the characters, Anton. You can't really.
It's just one of those examples of terrible decision making by the studio where it's like your script is questionable at best. You could really help things out by casting some kind of a reputable actor as your villain. Like think about how many mediocre comic book movies we have where at least it has a good villain. Anton, there's a film that we're covering coming up, Thor: The Dark World, which is a bad Marvel movie, but it's like, okay, but it has Tom Hiddleston in it as Loki. You're like, okay, it has that going for it. Right. None of this is present here.
And it's just such a shame because, I mean, it's Dracula, literally like the vampire of all vampires. But
that's the other part of it is if he had just been some random movie of the week villain, I don't think it would have worked at all, but it would have been less of a negative impact than this. It's like, this is Dracula. This is supposed to be the king of the vampires. He can also turn into a giant monster sometimes.
And also he was in Syria?
Iraq? Was it Iraq?
Yeah, I think it was Syria. I think it was Syria. I have it written in my notes that it was Syria. Unless that's the lore from the comic books, because the lore that I'm aware of is Vlad Dracul up in Transylvania. He didn't like the actual characters up there, not in Syria.
Well, they try to explain it as he was like a Sumerian god or something like that.
Right.
That was the part where Wesley Snipes walked off set.
So then why even call him Dracula?
I don't know.
The oh god, what is it? What We Do in the Shadows. The vampires in there and like Baron Athernance and like the Vampiric Council. Yeah, it's funny, but like at least it's consistent. You know what I mean?
Fun Easter egg in that show where they had Wesley Snipes in jail on the show.
Where he was calling in.
That was actually really, really good.
Dark greetings after like everyone else. I love that show. Not to digress, but real talk, the vampires in that show, as incompetent as they are more competent than every other vampire in this movie.
Of course. It's a pretty low bar. You know what? I take back what I said. I don't think this film hit rock bottom when the Apple playlist thing popped up. I think when Drake wanders into the vampire Hot Topic, I think that's like That was it for me. Like,
when he's walking down the street, you could have replaced the music with "Staying Alive" and it would work perfectly.
Yeah.
it was the RZA.
Staying alive, staying alive, and he's just walking down the street instead of the I don't know, emo corn-esque track that they played
It's
over
the RZA.
it. Like
Wu-Tang.
I did
Wu-Tang,
look at I did look at the music. I did not like the music in this movie at all.
Not the RZA's best work.
What was it? That's lethal.
That's
Or
fatal.
That's fatal.
That's fatal.
Fart on the elevator. That's fatal.
Mm.
It's a bad song. I can't.
Blade, ready to die. It's like, is that a question or?
There's the dialogue
Bad
is
dialogue.
so flat.
Is there a single good performance in this film? I don't think there is.
No,
No.
I'll say that, but like I feel like cock juggling Thundercut was improvised, and I got to give props to that.
I will say, it just got so grating by the end of the movie to have
I know.
so much improv. It's
Mhm.
like too much was put in. We got too much Reynolds.
I still stand by the fact that it's not his fault, though.
Even if it's not his fault, it's what we got, and it's like
I know.
very,
It's not his fault,
very
but he
heavy.
didn't help.
Fair. That's a fair assessment.
He didn't help.
And it just didn't fit the tone.
No.
I also
Um,
noticed on the
yeah.
rewatch, one of the Night Stalkers, the black guy, who I don't even remember his name, he just disappears from the film. They don't show him killed, although I think he's on the houseboat when Drake wipes them all out, but you never see him.
I thought you see his dead body next to Patton Oswalt.
So
Oh, maybe? I don't know.
you know,
They certainly didn't make it an event, but
I joked about this before. Like Triple H has a really bad performance in the film, but I think maybe it was a really good line delivery when Ryan Reynolds said, "I think that has a bigger dick than you," and then Triple H just answers, "How do you know what mine looks like?"
I mean,
And, like,
it's like
who
something
wrote
from a
that in?
Saturday Night Live sketch, but
Like, who wrote that in?
yeah, somebody wrote that and was like, "Yeah, that's funny." Should we continue?
yeah, I Jessica Biel can't act either. I'm sorry. Does she realize her father is dead in the film? Because Blade never mentions it to her, right? Like, oh, by the way, I was with your father when he shot a bunch of FBI agents and blew himself up.
Nah, she was over it.
You brought this up. I'm like, listen, I really don't want to defend this film, but you're forcing me to. The way she came off to me was like she didn't really give a shit about him anyway.
She gave a shit enough to be a vampire hunter.
Yeah, usually in those situations, they just become strippers.
Oh, Anton. But yes, I mean,
There's no
No.
defending this, Eric.
no, I'm just saying it
No,
makes
no,
sense
I don't
that
accept
she
this.
wouldn't really give a shit if her dad was dead.
Does she
She
even
wouldn't
know?
care.
It's never mentioned in the film to her.
Why does she need to know? She got Blade. They were after Blade. They need Blade. The prophecy doesn't talk about
You would
Old
just
Man
think
Whistler.
at some point a conversation be like, hey, by the way, like, what happened to my dad? Like, oh, I don't know.
He got blown up. They saw that it got blown up, and Blade was the only person who made it out of that building. There were cops dead,
Right.
Whistler's dead,
But they never address it. It's just so weird. Like, not
No.
even once.
But Whistler, she specifically said Whistler wanted like nothing to do with her and told her to go away.
Good thing she took his name. I would have rather watched an hour of Eric Bogosian's talk show than this film.
I don't know who that
He's
is.
the guy in the talk show in the beginning. He's
Yeah.
like, so vampires are real. What do we do about it?
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Are we close to the Mahershala Ali versions going to have Alex Jones talking about vampires?
I hope
They're
that
putting
happens.
the blood in the water and they're making all the vampires gay.
You've seen the meme about him explaining the politics of Phantom Menace? It's like,
Yes.
so Senator Palpatine is from the planet Naboo. He funds both sides of this civil war.
Oh man.
I don't have a whole lot else to add here other than James Remar is in this movie. He's like an all-time great character actor. He plays one of the FBI agents.
Is it the fuck with my thing guy?
It might have been.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know.
All time great. Fuck with my thing.
Yeah.
Listen, I've got no other reasons if we want to. Not that any of our scores are going to be very surprising, I don't think.
I think we should wrap this up.
I agree. Not because I don't love you guys. It's just the more we've talked about it, the worse my feelings have become towards it.
Well, Eric, you're the guest. Do you want to go first? or after us?
You know how I do it, man. I go last every time.
That's right.
Every
Okay.
time.
Anton, we should start switching off. Who went first last time?
I think I went first last time.
All right. I really didn't like the film when I first saw it, but I was blown away by how spectacularly awful this is. We talked about all the production issues. This was probably doomed from the start, just based on the foundation that they were trying to build it on. The lead actor was distant. He was toxic on set. The script was shite. You had an inexperienced director. You had, honestly, one of the worst supporting casts I've ever seen in one of the movies that we've covered. The action stunk, and it's an action movie, so it didn't have that going for it. This is, I would say, neolithically stupid villain in Drake. Like, all-time bad movie villain. And again, I'm a big Wesley Snipes fan. He could not salvage this disaster. In fact, seems to be the biggest problem with it. Regardless of which side of the story you believe more, this was Snipes' franchise, and it ultimately falls on him. He sabotaged it, whether he wanted to or not. Blade Trinity is not a film that should be celebrated. This is actual garbage. It's called The United Nations bad. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and it's such a shame because of how much I enjoyed the first two. Usually with sequels, there's some kind of a redeeming quality, but with Blade Trinity, I couldn't find any. I consider this film to be unwatchable. It is the lowest grade of F that I can give a film. Patton Oswalt was being very kind when he said it was a D-, and there's no possibility of me ever rewatching this film. I would recommend it to no one. I don't have enough bad things to say about it. This is one of those rare films, Anton. I'm putting it up with Exorcist 2, where I detested every single thing about it from start to finish.
So are you saying it's like a D plus or?
It's the lowest F- possible.
Yes, it's Anton now.
Yeah. So for me, this film felt like a parody. It felt like it had taken things that we knew to be familiar, like Blade and the universe that had been built in, and then decided to inject into it a direction into the Van Wilder style of comedy, as well as just perplexing story choices and elements that really did not make sense in the Blade movie. I feel like this was a movie that had no idea what it was doing with itself, when already it had established a very strong tone and world building in the first couple films, that it's amazing to me how badly they took this film and just missed the landing. It's so disappointing, not only because this was preceded by such successful comic book films that really had, no place in being chosen as like the first Marvel films really to just kind of kick off comic book films in general, but the fact that we get like Blade Trinity and the WB's version of Vampire Hunters and the Next Generation, it just makes it that much more disappointing. There really, like you said, Pat, there really are no redeeming qualities for this film. It's just very difficult to watch. I think that I just want to take a wooden stake and put it through the heart of this movie, but I can't, because this movie has no heart. This film gets an F.
Well, I remember when I challenged you to come up with this movie and make me watch this movie. We talk about films, or we have talked about films that are like, everyone's like, oh, it's so good. It's the best movie ever. And then it's built up to the point where it's like you see it and it's like, okay, that wasn't the best movie ever. Like, it was pretty good. This happened sort of like the inverse with Pat. Pat was like, this movie is so bad, like I threw up. And I was honestly waiting for that. There are bad films that are fun, or there are bad films where you can have fun critiquing them. I mentioned before, I am still emotionally scarred from The Lord of the Rings animated. I am not emotionally scarred by this movie. I gave that movie beyond an F. I gave it an in-school suspension, the Lord of the Rings animated. This is just an F, but it's almost worse because it's so forgettable. You have Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds. You have a bunch of bit characters where they hired these big actors, and every time they died, I didn't even care. I didn't even care about the little girl, okay? Like, she got taken, whatever. They tried to do too much with too many characters, and none of the characters were fleshed out or good in any way. It feels like there's no point to this movie, and it feels like it shouldn't have even been made. It doesn't add anything to what came before. And like I said, I would consider the first Blade movie an average movie. I wouldn't say it was like, oh, it's the best, action film ever. Maybe it was at the time, you know what I mean? Like, but after seeing that, I didn't really have a high bar, and this went way below it. You know what I mean? It like aggressively swam as deep as it could to get to the lowest bar. I think you're right. Nobody should see this movie. I'm glad that at least some of the actors were able to salvage their careers after this. But yeah, it was not good. And it wasn't even a fun not good. It was just not good. I was looking for excuses not to pay attention to this movie while it was on. And that's pretty bad, even for a bad movie. So it's an F, boys. F all the way.
Failure across the board.
Ooh,
Across the board.
I guess there are no surprises there.
No. I think we laid out our reasons throughout this entire episode. It wasn't really.
So, Eric, would you say, although you didn't hate it as much as I did, I successfully gave you the worst movie for this season that I could come up with?
Well, the season's not over, so I don't know what else y'all have planned, but I would confidently say, yeah, you succeeded.
Then I've done my job. I mean, there's a Steven Seagal movie coming, but I have a feeling I will at least find amusement in that.
That's the thing. The Steven Seagal movies are usually bad, but
they're good bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I also cook. Keep the faith, Stranix.
Oh my God.
Zaba. Well, Eric, thank you for joining us. It's once again been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh
thanks for putting me through this. You guys are doing great work. I hope I can continue helping you guys out as your producer. And yeah, this was fun. I always love talking about movies with you guys, and hope I'm ready for next season. You just I don't know what.
Do you have a challenge for us to think about for the next season?
A challenge for you to think about for the next season. You could force me to watch a sports movie.
I like it. I
don't know what.
I have you on the books for a film next season.
All right, welcome.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the one that we talked about?
Yeah, the new Alien movie.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, but I have to go to the theaters. God.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. Dude, I was talking to my, I guess it's my cousin-in-law. It's Caitlin's cousin, my wife's cousin, and she's all into like movies and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I haven't been to the movies in a decade.
Wow. Hopefully,
Thanks
Alien
for having me,
Romulus
boys.
is better than this, which it wouldn't be hard.
It wouldn't be very hard.
Well, that's it for Blade Trinity. Next week, Anton. Oh, it's Thor: The Dark World.
Yes, we're gonna meet some dark elves and see what happens.
Yeah, I don't really remember what happens actually.
The
That's a good thing.
Infinity Stone in this film is a liquid.
So it's not a stone.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's a liquid stone.
I'll keep that in mind.
The ether.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I remember that. Well, we'll get around to it.
Kat Dennings is in it.
Oh yes, she is. Yes. All right. Well, we will see you next time. Eric, once again, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, boys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better? If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.